If anybody has a Bible and they like following along, please turn in it to Luke chapter 10. This is where we will spend our time. There's somebody in this room who can confirm this about me.
Whatever that is.
Yeah. If you go into any room where I occupy a space, next to the bed, my desk, my truck, the storage building, the studio, there is not a single horizontal surface that doesn't have something on it. On the dash of my truck, they're not just single things, there are things buried under other things, so that there's a kind of a stack. I find things underneath the dash of my truck stack that I didn't even know were there. Wow, look at that, I didn't know I had one of those. And everything, this is something that's endemic to me. Everything in the life that I live is like that. It's just filled up, totally filled up. I don't know if that's good or bad. And I really think, to some degree, no matter where we are in our trajectory in this world, there are things in our lives that we bring in, that we use to fill up the time that we have here on this earth. Some of them are good, some of them are not. Some of them are neutral in the sense that they don't really change anything. But any of them that extract, we've got the fixed commodity from birth to death, that's it, right? Nobody saves time. We say that, but it doesn't mean anything. We're spending it constantly. And where we fit all these pieces into our lives, which of them are reducing our ability to just hear God's voice? That when He calls us out, we're able to say, okay, I'll do that. I don't know how to answer that. Don't even know how to answer it for myself. But let's explore this text and see what we can discover. I'll begin reading in verse 38 of Luke chapter 10. Everybody knows this passage. If you've been to even an elementary Sunday school class, everybody's heard something on this passage. As Jesus and His disciples went on their way, Jesus entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed Him and them as guests. Martha had a sister named Mary, which, by the way, Mary is the most common name for anybody in Judaism in the first century. Did you know that? For a woman, of course. Who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what He said. Every fourth woman was named Mary. How about that? But Martha was distracted with all the preparations she had to make for everyone. So she came up to Jesus and said, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work alone? Tell her to help me. Jesus answered Martha and said, Martha, Martha, you're so worried and troubled about so many things, but one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen the best part, and this will not be taken away from her. Now, I got to tell you, I don't have to tell you, I don't have to do anything, but I'm gonna. I don't like this passage at all. And the reason I don't like it is, I think for the most part, as it has been expounded upon through the centuries, that it in many instances has been improperly expounded upon. That's my assessment. There are so many historical pressures here in this text that if they're not taken into account, we do not get the message that Jesus is trying to communicate to us at all. And I don't know how many sermons you've heard on it or how many Sunday school classes you've attended where it's been brought up. See, if there's anything in your life that gets in front of your ability to listen to the Lord, there's something wrong with you. That is not at all what Jesus is saying here. It's just not. Martha was doing exactly what Martha was supposed to be doing. 100%. In the Near East, in the Near Orient, which the Mesopotamian region, the Levant, Israel, all of that qualifies. A woman, if you had what was known as eurodixato, that is people under your roof that were coming to be under your roof, the same word, by the way, that Zacchaeus uses in Luke's account of Zacchaeus when Jesus is going to come into Zacchaeus' home. Same word. The woman was obligated, not requested, obligated to take care of all the guests and to supply all their needs, food, drink, everything they needed, washing their feet, whatever needed to be done. That was her obligation. Now you can imagine, Jesus got 12 disciples, right? So there's at least 13 here. All show up at your house, and you're obligated to take care of all of them. You're going to be busy. There's just all there is to it. And the woman was expected to do that without any question. And it wasn't like a slavery issue. It wasn't like some kind of bad social. It's the same exact thing as if you went to a restaurant. What do we train our children to do? We train them to hold their fork like that. Yeah. Not like a fly swatter. Right? Same thing. And we don't think of it as being evil. We don't think of it as being something that we shouldn't be training them to do, or we're hurting them in some way. We don't even think about it. We just train them to do that. It's exactly like that with Martha here. She has been raised by her mother. Her mother was raised by her mother. Her mother was raised by her mother, and going back for generations, that this is what you are obligated as a woman to do when you receive people eurodexato under your roof. And there's no question about it. That's just how it is. She's not upset about it. What she's upset about is she's having to do it by herself. And she's having no help from her sister. Martha was attending to those things that were expected, and women in this culture had no place for teaching. None. Now, women, what does a woman need to be taught the Torah for, the Tanakh? Why do they need to know anything about the Bible? The only thing they need to know about the Bible is to obey. Obey their husbands. Obey the traditions, the rules that have been set down for what a woman is to do and be in that culture. That's the only thing they and you don't need an education to understand that. You learn that at home through mom, and mom's mom, and mom's mom's mom. And it goes on and on. No rabbi would teach a woman in this culture under any circumstance. Just would not happen. Now this is where you see in Jesus how countercultural he was, because he had women followers. There were 100 people following Jesus by Pentecost. Lots of women. And you read in the text, lots of women gave to Jesus' ministry, supported him financially, and the 12. So Jesus is countercultural right away. Now, I don't know how many of you saw the movie Yentl with Barbara Streisand. Everybody see that movie? I didn't like the movie. I mean, to me, those kinds of, I'm not good at those kinds of feely sort of movies. You know, the high drama with people. I got enough drama at home and in life in general. You know, it feels like life in America is dramatic enough without adding to it. But it was a decent movie, and what it was about was a woman named Ashiel, Barbara Streisand, was raised in a home where her father was a rabbi, and he taught her the Tanakh, that is the Old Testament. He wasn't supposed to, but he did. And then he died. She grew up loving the Bible. And so she wanted to go to an Orthodox Jewish school, but there's no such thing as an Orthodox Jewish school where women can go. So what did she do? She dressed up like a man and pretended to be a man for the entire time she was at that school. Now you can see all kinds of dramatic situations where she's in a dormitory with 2 other guys. And you can see how things might go awry when it comes time to go to bed or take a shower or anything else. Somehow she managed to keep it under wraps for the whole of the movie until the very end. And then one of the guys that was in the dormitory, they fell in love, and everybody lived happily ever after. So in the plot, she is living out in that plot exactly what was expected of a woman, and that is that a woman, there's no reason to teach them the Torah, the law. No reason at all. Perfectly unnecessary. In this instance, with Jesus, Mary is behaving as a man by coming and setting aside her duties and listening to Jesus. Now, you've got a situation where some other stuff's been happening, and it's kind of significant in this particular instance. You got the 70 that were sent out, and they've got instructions on being eurodexatoed into other homes. I realize ED is not a proper Greek suffix to Talk about past tense, but that's good enough.
We don't know.
That's right. Jesus has instructed a lawyer regarding what a neighbor is. There was a legal precedent there. Jesus is defying that legal precedent by saying, who's your neighbor? The person who needs you. He then recounts the story of the Good Samaritan, following up on that. These last two are completely countercultural in Jesus, because no Jew would see a Samaritan as a neighbor, ever. If they fell out right in front of you, they weren't your neighbor, so you don't have to help them. And then, with regard to the Good Samaritan, that the Samaritan was the one who did God's will is just a totally shocking thing to tell any Jewish person of that particular time period. Completely shocking. Now, one of the problems with people who interpret these passages is a lot of them, scholars, see Jesus as some kind of first century hippie who's just countercultural for the sake of being countercultural. He's defying all the governmental norms. He's speaking truth to power, as we say in our culture today. That's not what he's doing at all. He's coming back as God in the flesh to restore what was God's original intent for all this to begin with. That's all he's doing. So this narrative contains some teachings, and I don't want to diminish the fact that there is something to be said for keeping first things first and doing, as Lee Iacocca says, the main thing, the main thing. Jesus is outlining proper priorities in what I would call normative living. That is what you and I have to go through every day, whether it's in the first century or the 21st. He doesn't tell Martha to neglect her duties. Did you notice that in the text? He doesn't say, Martha, you need to just put all those pots and pans and things down and come on over here and let's have some teaching. He doesn't say that. And you'll notice Martha addresses him as Kurios, Lord. So she knows who he is. She knows fully who he is. He's the rabbi. He's the teacher. He's the Messiah. She knows all that. So what you've got here is Jesus using these two women to teach what I would call equilibrium in living. That is, where do we fit? On the one hand, Jesus, in having Mary seated before him, listening to him, is not saying to everybody, look, don't worry about anything going on around you. You just focus on what God is saying through his word. Study it. Don't pay any attention to anybody's needs. Don't take care of your children. Don't take care of your finances. Don't take care of your house. Don't take care of your animals. Don't worry about the fact that the paint's peeling on the front door. Don't worry about any of that. Just listen to me. That is not what he's saying at all. Not at all. Because he doesn't correct Martha. He doesn't correct her. Doesn't tell her to leave what she's doing. And he's also not telling Mary, in his saying she's chosen the best thing, that the best thing is for you and me to just listen to God and be like a ping pong ball on the top of the rapids, feeling none of the turbulence underneath. He's not saying that either. The Buddhists like that idea. They love that idea. Let's just eliminate all desire and be like the ping pong ball that stays on top of the rapids, and the rough water underneath has no effect on us at all. He's not saying that. Did you know in this country right now, I didn't know this, I thought this was very interesting. Maybe you don't think so at all, but I think it's kind of interesting. There is an $8 to $10 billion industry, and the industry is teaching you and me how to organize our closets. $8 to $10 billion teaching us how to organize our stuff. Isn't that amazing? What does that say about us in terms of any kind of priority structure? I know what it says to me. I've got too much stuff. That's all it says. And where was life changed by the fact of the acquisition of the stuff? It was changed in my ability to be quiet and listen to the Lord. I got a lot of stuff to take care of. It needs my attention. Martha sees Mary as unbalanced because she's not helping with the chores. Mary doesn't seem to care that Martha is too busy. Who's really unbalanced in the text? Who's unbalanced? They both are. They both are. Jesus knows he's on the way to Jerusalem. He's facing death. He knows why he's going there. Maybe he just wanted a quiet afternoon. I don't know. Sometimes it seems to me that we bring ministry to people who don't want it. Have you ever thought about that? I remember once I had the flu. I've only had the flu about 4 times that I can think of in my whole life. I had the flu, had it bad. And for me, the flu has always done one thing. It's always made my head feel like it was just going to pop. It hurts so bad that if I'm laying there and I turn my head that far, it just starts pounding again. If I'm not laying perfectly still. Well, I have a relative who loves to talk. And the relative decided it would be a good day to come visit. Becky told him I was sick. That's all the more reason to come. So for an hour and a half, he stood in the bedroom where I was while my head is just pounding. I can't answer him. I don't want to. And he ministered to me in a visit. Now, sometimes that's just not ministry. I've got friends who I know well, who the last thing they want in the world is for you to show up when they're sick or in the hospital. They don't want you there. They'd rather you didn't come. I remember once we were traveling, and we had a concert in Indiana. We got done with the concert, packed up the equipment. It was by now 10 o'clock. We had to be in Virginia the next morning for a chapel at a college. So what are we going to do? We're going to just start driving as soon as we pack up. Drove all night. We'd been up since early that morning. Drove all night. Got to the college, set up, did the chapel. We then had to take all the equipment and drive several hundred miles that day to another concert we were doing in Virginia at a big church. Got there, set the equipment up, did the concert, packed up the equipment. Now it's about 9 or 10 o'clock. We're sitting in the pastor's office. They wanted us to, the assistant pastor is in there, and the concert was in the afternoon. The assistant pastor says he's just beaming, happy as he can possibly be. As we say in the South, like a billy goat eating stickers. He's beaming and says, you just got to stay for our evening service. And we hadn't slept for 2 days. We've done nothing but drive for 2 days. And we didn't want to stay for the evening service. And he was totally insistent, just as happy as he could be. He kept going. Finally, we were waiting for the pastor to come in so we could leave. Pastor comes in, and the assistant pastor just jumps on the pastor and starts beaming the same things to him about how we should stay for this service. And the pastor looks at us and he says, these people just need to go to bed. That's what they need. The pastor understood what ministry is. The assistant pastor did not in that moment. So what about our lives? What priorities do we hold? What kind of clutter do we have wherein we are just so busied by the things that we possess or do that we don't really have time to think about the Lord? I wonder sometimes if just being a believing citizen in this country for a lot of people isn't sufficient for just about their whole life in terms of their concerns. I remember a friend of mine in Pennsylvania, whose house was, now please don't take this personally, but it was a she, and her house was, I know that if I dropped my cornbread on the floor, I could pick it up and eat it. There was never anything of any kind of debris anywhere. All the countertops were perfectly arranged. All the spice bottles were in descending order down a little rack. Every window was spotless. The sills were spotless. The shades were set at just the right height. Sliding doors were, everything was perfect all the time. And she drove her family crazy with that. Yeah. Crazy. To the detriment of her marriage. I know because I used to talk to the husband. See, sometimes we aim at things and we make them the main thing, and they're in no way should they be the main thing. Sometimes we want to be so ready for the Lord to come back that we're not any use to anybody here. There's a country song, I don't like it, Good song, but I don't like the message. It says, live like you're dying. That's impossible to do. That's a tyranny. Think of it. That you've got to squeeze every minute of your living and my living for everything, every last second that it's worth. Who wants to live like that? So could it be that this text is saying that God wants us to be as human beings in His presence in another way? Could it be that our heart condition is way more important than any kind of perfection in what we're doing? Could that be? Could it be that we withhold mercy sometimes because we don't give ourselves any at all? You ever been around somebody like that? They're merciless to themselves, and so they expect you to be in the same situation. Could Mary just be an example of how God works with an individual? I think so. Could Mary be used to show us the foolishness of some kind of formula in terms of our interaction with the Lord? I love reading the Gospels, but there's one aspect of them that I find a little troubling. When Jesus made a turn and went someplace, they knew where He was going all the time. I don't. I wish I did. Jesus said, blessed are they who believe and yet have not seen. Lee Iacocca, as I quoted earlier on, said, keep the main thing the main thing. The problem is, a lot of the time we're living here in this world, we don't know what the main thing is. We come to a gathering, we expect some kind of experience from it. Maybe we don't get one, and after a few Sundays we move on. That's having the wrong main thing. That's all it is. Every moment we live in this world is an opportunity to find God moving in some way in us and through us. Just like we looked at in Sunday school today, every moment matters. But that doesn't mean that our concentration should be that we're going to squeeze every moment for everything it's worth. Mary wasn't. She just wanted to listen to Him. Movement for us in the modern world is always a kind of a default. If you're moving, you're doing good. Well, I don't think so. Sometimes it's good to just kind of be and wait. No formula. No set of it's got to happen at this time of the day. No set of some kind of circumstance where it's got to be this way or no way. Just being the person who wants to be close to God. Then we can find ourselves sitting at His feet even within the movements that we all have to make. I think that's what this message is, as Jesus would give it to us. You can follow me, and you can follow me very closely, but that doesn't mean that you're supposed to just neglect everything in the world that you have to do. I don't think that's the case at all. I don't know where everybody is today, but if I've said anything about which you've got a question, you want to pray with me, I'll stay here as long as it takes as we close.